Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, over the past seemingly week and a half, there's been about 1,000 NBA player comparisons posted about Pascal Siakam and some other players in the NBA. Last week, the internet, YouTube, Reddit, all that sort of stuff was filled with Jason Tatum, Pascal Siakam comparisons, but now Bleacher Report has put out an article redrafting the 2016 draft that obviously Siakam was drafted 27th in that draft to the Toronto Raptors, and they put him number 1 over guys like Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, Jamal Murray, Domantas Sabonis, a lot of all-stars, a lot of high-caliber players in that list, and there's a lot of people sort of putting a lot of pushback to this list. Obviously, as Raptors fans, we love Pascal Siakam, but what are your thoughts on this sort of redraft? Because they're all still young guys with lots of potential, but we're far removed from that right now. Sound off on this, Riker?
Ben, very open-ended statement of question to leave me on here, but basically it's fine to think about it like that, but it would never happen because realistically, if you redrafted Pascal Siakam in 2016 to the 76ers, he's not going to be the player today that he is, right? That you're not going to go through the 76ers development and have the Pascal Siakam in which you would want to draft him as the first pick, as you probably currently would. And case in point would be everything that's going on with the 76ers team right now, because you're basically squandering the talent of both Embiid and Ben Simmons, right? That these guys have way more potential than what they're showing. That, or they really are very soft individuals, which I don't believe. I think that they have competitiveness. I just think that team just can't bring it out of them. Second case in point, if he went to the Lakers, I would say, even if he didn't, Brandon Ingram is probably the most talented guy of those top three between Simmons, Siakam, and himself right now. Right,
like
he's the most skilled player right now. I think he has the best points, and I mean, Ben Simmons probably doing a better overall job. But if you look at that Lakers squad that he got drafted to, that would have been even worse situation for Pascal Siakam, right? He would have had no ability to develop, especially with a guy like LeBron going into that team. And even if he had to stick around on that roster that LeBron got to, then he certainly wouldn't see the same development that he would have got on the Toronto Raptors team. So it's good to say, yeah, he probably would be the first pick, but he wouldn't be the Pascal Siakam that you'd want to pick first if he went to one of those other teams.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely in agreement with that. If you're factoring in development and the certain situations that they're going to and all that sort of stuff, obviously someone's going to benefit more being on the Toronto Raptors. Fred VanVleet was in this draft as well. He was undrafted, unlisted. He probably wouldn't even gotten an opportunity with some of these teams. So that development side is definitely an argument to be made when you're looking at a redraft. But Riker, if you're looking at these players as they are right now, and if, let's just say the past 4 years didn't matter, and in 2016 you're picking the players that have been made right now and the potential that they've shown already. So assume Pascal Siakam is going to make this trajectory. Do you think this makes sense? Do you think that Pascal Siakam provides more value to his team than a Ben Simmons or a Brandon Ingram right now?
Who has the number 1 pick?
The Sixers.
So we're saying that right now the 76ers have the number 1 pick for 2020 versions of all the guys that are in the 2016 draft.
Essentially. Yeah, so don't worry about development, how they're going to play out, all that sort of stuff, because that totally changes the player trajectories, and that makes these lists sort of less fun to do and more speculative. But if we could have I'd think that the 76ers would pick Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram over Ben Simmons, really?
I think so. And well, just because, do they know what Ben Simmons has already given them as the leader of their team? Or are they just looking at Ben Simmons in a vacuum as some player?
Yeah, you could just look at these players right now and sign them to their teams.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Would you not want, given everything that's happened to the 76ers, would you not want a guy who can score the ball better, right? Especially if you already have Joel Embiid, right? You're getting the same height. Right, you're not getting as good playmaking. Definitely, I'm not going to make that argument. But you got a way better scorer on your team.
Defense is a big factor. So, would you pick Brandon Ingram over Siakam as well?
For the 76ers, yes, absolutely. They're not going to pick a power forward, right? Because Siakam's not a scorer yet. He's been off and on the number 1 guy for the Raptors, but he's by no means as consistent of a scorer as is Brandon Ingram. And Siakam, you got to realize a lot of his points comes from his motor, which is great. But, like, the 76ers are looking for their number one guy, basically.
So you're going with Brandon, and that's interesting. I thought we were going to sort of write off Brandon Ingram in this debate and make it a Ben Simmons Siakam, but I definitely pick Siakam over Brandon Ingram because I think scoring-wise, I see what you're getting from. Brandon Ingram's more skilled, but that motor that Siakam brings is definitely an asset in terms of scoring. And, they have Brandon Ingram right now is averaging 24 points per game on a little bit better shooting splits, 46 from the field, 38 from three. Siakam's about 46 from the field, 36 from three. So they're putting up similar splits. Siakam's obviously the better rebounder, the better defender. Ingram's more of a wing, catch you off guard. But I think just Siakam's ability to score off people and the potential that he can add in being paired, like his fit with other stars. His game is unique enough.
What fit does he have, Ben, with Joel Embiid?
Well, Siakam can shoot threes and run the floor and sort of space everything out and be a mobile defender.
Pascal Siakam, where were the majority of Pascal Siakam shots this season for the Toronto Raptors?
I don't have the shooting splits in front of me, but he had a lot of post-ups. He had a lot of
from the eye test.
threes.
Exactly, a lot of post-ups. Yeah. So where is Joel Embiid going to go? Pascal Siakam needs spacing, and that's the reason that the Raptors tried to meticulously craft a team where even our number 5 would be able to step outside. You want to play him a lot with Serge Ibaka. We see Marc Gasol stepping outside a lot more of the perimeter than he ever did in his whole career. It's because you want Pascal Siakam to have as open a lane as possible to beat his mismatch off the dribble. Where are you going to put Joel Embiid in that situation? You're not going to have Joel Embiid, one of the best dominating centers in the league, sitting out behind the 3-point line for Pascal. You're picking one or the other then in that case in every possession.
But that scoring duo, that defense that he brings, I think Siakam just makes more sense. He doesn't need the ball in his hands that much. And yes, you can't have two players posting up immediately, but I don't think Joel Embiid plays most of his game sort of in the mid-post area right now with Ben Simmons. I think he'll get more touches down in the paint with Siakam there as he's a better shooter than Simmons. But Joel Embiid has shown he can have value not just being a post-up player, as we've seen with the 76ers currently. And yes, Brandon Ingram's a better shooter, but I think everything else that Siakam brings to the table makes him sort of a better fit for the Sixers, just a better player. And I guess, Ryker, so instead of just focusing on the Sixers and not worrying about that
point, how is he a better player? How is he a better player?
Yeah, so that's why I kind of wanted to bring this too. Who's the better player out of these in this draft? Who's the best player in this draft? And I think it's right now, it is Pascal Siakam when you take into account scoring, rebounding. The only real area that Simmons, Ingram, and some other guys in the draft have over him is playmaking. And we've seen Siakam's sort of handle and pass improve this season. And the trajectory in terms of improvement for Siakam as compared to a guy like Ben Simmons is certainly, even though he's an older guy, he's older than these players. And I think that's an argument that could be taken into account because Simmons is 23 years old. Brandon Ingram is 22 right now. So they're 2-3 years younger than Siakam, who's 25. But the growth that Siakam has and the potential that he's shown to develop in certain areas, I think his scoring paired with his defense, paired with the way he plays off of people, makes him the best player in this draft currently.
You see, I'm still going to go Brandon Ingram here because really, by all accounts, except for rebounding, Brandon Ingram statistically is the better player on less minutes played on a team where he's kind of the number one guy. And we towards Zion mania, of course, a lot of that pressure was taken off of him because of all the hype and wanting to protect the rim, but really he's never played on a good team. He was on a bad Lakers team. He's on a bad Pelicans team. He's the number one scoring threat on any given night, and he's still shooting almost 50% from the field. Really good 3-point shooting, especially for a guy of his height. I think that talent-wise, this guy right now is the most skilled. And if you want to put in the argument about potential, I'm going to back up Pascal Siakam 100%. But if you're just saying who's the best player right now, it's got to be Brandon Ingram in a vacuum.
So in a vacuum, would you draft Pascal Siakam number one? In a vacuum.
What?
In a vacuum, would you draft Pascal Siakam number one?
It depends on the team. Because do you want
in a vacuum, no team?
Siakam? You got to pick Brandon Ingram. Is it a 5-man team or is it 1-man? Is it ones? Because this is my argument, Ben. Mm-hmm. Is on the Toronto Raptors, do you want Pascal Siakam or Brandon Ingram? Between the two, would you want Pascal Siakam or Brandon Ingram? You want Pascal Siakam, obviously, because of his motor, because you already have guys that do the playmaking. You already have a lot of guys that can knock down the three ball, so you're able to give him the lane so he can drive and take advantage of his skill set. But if you have a team where you don't have those luxuries, where the rest of your team is a top-ranked defense in the league, and where you have complementary three-point shooters, and you have guys that can do good playmaking, then Pascal Siakam would struggle. He would not be the Pascal Siakam that he is right now, because he wouldn't have that ability to attack as much, because there'd be way more pressure on him. Whereas Brandon Ingram, despite the pressure on him, because he doesn't have the same team, he has more tricks up his sleeve. He has more basketball-type moves that he can do. He has better jumper, better mechanics. I think he's the better player that you'd want, but not for the Raptors.
I'll take that argument against you, because I think Siakam's ability to play with better players, I think Siakam's, it's sort of the DeMar DeRozan effect with Danny Green comparison. Obviously, the skill difference between Danny Green and DeMar DeRozan is not comparable to Siakam and Ingram. Siakam and Ingram are much more similar, but DeMar DeRozan's sort of play style doesn't work well with other stars, right? He needs the ball in his hands a lot. He needs to dribble. He needs to have the rock to really get his buckets. And I think that's a similar situation with Brandon Ingram and Pascal Siakam. While Siakam can, they're both similar talent. They have the similar abilities to shot create and all that. Siakam's a better rebounder defender. Ingram's a better sort of creator off the dribble and shooter. But Siakam's game, I think, is more transferable to playing with better players. And this is the same argument I make with Ben Simmons, even though I think Ben Simmons, because you brought up the point of talent at the beginning, I think Ben Simmons' talent might be the best out of all of them in terms of his size and his ability to pass. His floor vision is something that's really underrated in players, and it's super valued to the Sixers team. It's just that he can't shoot, and that's probably a product of the Sixers development, as you brought up. But Pascal Siakam's ability to play with other stars, we saw him last year. When he was playing with Kawhi Leonard, he was shooting had a 63% true shooting percentage. His value, his ability to play off other guys, it's proven on a championship level. When Brandon Ingram was playing with LeBron James, another star similar to Kawhi Leonard, they couldn't do anything. They really couldn't do much together.
LeBron James hated that team. He wanted them all gone, and he shipped them all away.
Kawhi didn't want to be here or anything like that. You can make that similar argument. They're both similar.
You can't
type
make that
players,
argument because
though.
Kawhi still went out there and played. You see LeBron, there was so many times throughout the season where he just stopped halfway through, or he'd sit at the end of the bench and he wouldn't communicate with his teammates, that you saw him getting angry at his teammates. I don't think that the situation is nearly as comparable, especially given you're talking about a world championship Toronto Raptors team, and you're talking about a Lakers team that missed the playoffs, and you can't put missing the playoffs on Brandon Ingram specifically.
But I'm saying he didn't play that well off of LeBron James. He didn't make them better to a point where they could have made the playoffs. He played really well when LeBron James went down. When LeBron was out, Brandon Ingram stepped up until he got injured. That's when we really saw Ingram turn into the guy that looked like he could be a potential all-star. But when he was playing alongside another guy that really demanded the ball, that really the offense wasn't really ran through him, Ingram really couldn't be that guy, have the same production. He was still good, but he wasn't as good as Pascal Siakam in that role.
Well, yeah, but you could make an argument like that with Russell Westbrook. You can make an argument like that with Paul George. You could say that those guys play better when they're the number one guy, which would be absolutely true. It's already been proven in the NBA. But you can't go and step around here and say that Pascal Siakam is better than Russell Westbrook or Paul George, and that you'd pick Pascal Siakam over them in the draft. I understand that as a complementary piece and still as a star, he is a guy that you'd want on an already perfected roster. But if you're picking a number one draft pick, you want the guy that you're basically picking him with the intention to be the man. If you're picking a guy that's going to be your second or your third best player, that's not really the number one draft. You're not picking a number one guy to be your second or third best player. You're picking the number one guy in hopes that he's the number one guy on your team.
Who's the number one guy on this team this season, before the season went down? Clearly Pascal Siakam on the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, but after the benefit of having 3 or 4 years on a championship team and having so many injuries and inconsistency, and you still can't say he was great. He was inconsistent.
He was averaging 23 points per game. Yes, he was inconsistent, but he was the number one guy on the second seed in the Eastern Conference. That can't be taken away from him, even though he had some
that
points
can
in the
be
season.
taken away from him. That can be taken away from him to an extent. Yes, it can. If you look at the depth of the Toronto Raptors and the skill of the second best, the third best, the fourth best. Listen, the rest of our team, don't forget, who are the rest of our players? Fred Van Vliet, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol.
Do you think we would have been better with Brandon Ingram
Norman
than Pascal
Powell.
Siakam this year?
But again, that's my argument. I'm saying I would rather have Pascal Siakam on the Toronto Raptors. But if you're asking me who's the best player, who would be the number one pick if I'm the 76ers, I'm picking Brandon Ingram because on his own, he's a more skilled player right now than Pascal Siakam.
Not taking into account
with
potential
Joel
or
Embiid.
growth.
Well, again, obviously, if I'm backing the Siakam horse in that race because he does have more upside, definitely. You've seen it from his development every year after year. But, Brandon Ingram was also a candidate for most improved this year. So they're close. Like, it's a close race.
It's interesting debate. I thought you were going to argue more for Simmons if you weren't in agreement for Siakam, but I guess to take a look at the Simmons point, should he be counted in this? Because I know a lot of people, especially at Creep Sixers Reddit before this, said it was blasphemous for people to even think someone should draft Siakam over Ben Simmons. But looking at their stats, even though Simmons I think is underrated in the league, he averages 17 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists compared to Pascal Siakam's. Let me pull this up. 24 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Obviously, Simmons is the better playmaker. You can make an argument for defender on either side, but I think that's too tight to really compare. Do you think there's any argument for Simmons, especially where if he gets a jump shot, he could be the mini LeBron that people are talking about?
Yeah, but you can't really say that, though, because Ben Simmons right now, okay, one, he wouldn't fit on the Toronto Raptors, right? Because if you substitute him into Siakam's role, Siakam would not have that same role if he wasn't able to shoot the three this season.
Yep.
Right? He wouldn't be that number one guy. So Ben Simmons would not have that same role in the Toronto Raptors. Same thing as if you're picking a number one guy, you want him to be the number one option. He's not. You need to put great players around him so that Ben Simmons can do his playmaking. Right? At the end of a game, if it's close, you're probably not going to Ben Simmons to score. You're going to Ben Simmons maybe to create if you have a long shot clock. Right? But he's not your scorer at the end of a game. So you still need a player as good or better than him. So you can't really pick him. He's not that number one guy to me unless he has a jump shot. Because he doesn't, he shouldn't even be in this conversation. He's more like the Dennis Rodman of that Bulls team than he's anywhere near the Michael Jordan of that team. Right? He's approaching the Scottie Pippen, but he's not Michael Jordan. He's more Dennis Rodman, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I think Simmons is very underrated. I think he can still create and stuff. I guess the final question I'd pose to you, and I'd still pick Siakam in this area, but I think it gets a lot closer. I think Ben Simmons would definitely overtake Ingram in this, in my opinion, but if you could build the perfect team around these guys, as a lot of teams do with a number one pick, right? If you could obviously put a bunch of shooters and maybe another creator around Simmons, have a solid team around Siakam with spacing and some drivers and some creators like the Toronto Raptors are now, and Ingram have a lot of guys that aren't going to demand the ball that much. Which team, including upside, if you could start from this point right now, and then the futures are aligned and picked into it, so obviously we don't know what Siakam, Simmons, and Ingram could become. Maybe one of them averages 40 points, but that's looking at their potential right now. What team would you rather have?
That's tough. That's a tough one between Simmons and Siakam now, because if we're including upside, I think Ben Simmons has the most upside.
Mm-hmm. Like pure potential, just because of if he can
pure
get
potential.
that jumper. Yeah.
Because now you're talking about that jump shot. Yeah. Yep. I mean, if he had a jump shot right now, no argument, he's better than those other two.
Yeah.
No argument.
As homer as we may be at sometimes, Simmons with just a bit of floor spacing, so he has to be guarded somewhat, would be a very tough matchup.
Yeah, like he doesn't exist. LeBron is the closest guy to what Simmons would be if he had a jump shot, right? Because we have almost a perfect player in Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he doesn't have what Ben Simmons would have if Ben Simmons was the complete package. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit more physically dominating, but that playmaking it's almost unrivaled for a guy of his height. So, it's tough because you're like, all right, what if? Then you'd probably pick Ben Simmons. But in terms of what we have on the table right now, a mix of potential and skill, yeah, you're looking at Pascal Siakam, definitely.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. It's It's always weird looking at the redrafts and sort of how people look at them. I think we sort of look at them differently. Everyone sort of does. If you're looking at the team specifically, if you're just looking at players in a vacuum and the teams are just there, or if you're looking at the potential in the future and all that sort of stuff. But when you take everything into account, the most real-world situation, even though Siakam is a couple years older, he picked up basketball later, and he's definitely shown the most growth out of these guys. So I'm rolling with Siakam, but it's a tough race. It's a tight one right there.
Yeah, Ben. And listen, if the Toronto Raptors were fortunate enough to have the number 1 pick in that 2016 draft, and we did it all over again, knowing what we know now, funny enough, we would pick the same player that we picked at the 27th pick of that draft. So that's the one cool takeaway of this. And we didn't even speak about our boy Fred at 6th. So the Raptors, they got 2 of the top 10 gems of 2016 and what turned out to actually be a very loaded class. And we did it in the deep picks because the Raptors have the best scouting and the best development in the NBA. That's proven. That's a hard fact, Ben.
Hey, don't forget Jakob Poeltl at number 9. He turned into Kawhi. He turned into a chip.
That's true.
Jakob sacrificed himself for our souls.
Yeah, two of the top 10 stars of the 2016 plus a trade piece.
A piece of Kawhi.
The most valuable trade piece in NBA history.
A piece of Kawhi was taken in this draft. Maybe that should have been the number 1 pick. We should have made an argument for Jakob, considering he turned into Kawhi Leonard, but obviously DeMar was peace with that. But let us know what you guys think. Obviously, this is a tough debate right here. Let us know in the comment section below. You're the best for making this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Ryker, any last words?
That's it for me, Ben. Cheers.